Hello, everybody. So we had UFC 270 last night, and obviously I'm here to break down what happened, where certain things go from here. I mean, it's very hard further down the card, particularly, to have any remote idea of what to do with the fighters or what UFC is going to do with the fighters, because the matchmaking has, for a long time, not made a tremendous amount of sense. For example, on this card, you had Michel Pereira versus Andre Fial, a fight that didn't really make a lot of sense because this was Fial's debut and Pereira's been around for quite some time. I don't believe it was supposed to be anyone else. I'm looking at the canceled fights to see if Pereira had another fight, and it doesn't look like he did. And there are other examples of this. The Trevin Giles, Michael Morales fight. To be clear, both these fights were good, but like in terms of logically where these fighters should have been fighting, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I would obviously give the Barcelos-Henry thing a pass because Barcelos was not supposed to fight Victor Henry. This was supposed to be something else. This was changed up. And then there was a fight that got canceled that didn't make a ton of sense, which was Jack Della Maddalena taking on Warlley Alves, which, well, a fight that I think Maddalena might actually be ready for. It didn't make a lot of sense for Alves based on where he's been, so I'm kind of giving up on that. But the titles we'll talk about, and maybe some other things, and maybe we'll talk about what I'd like to see. The top of the card, you have Francis Ngannou versus Cyril Gane. Ngannou winning the fight somewhat surprisingly by decision with a wrestling heavy game down the stretch, when he, maybe because of the damaged MCL in his knee or just generally not being able to handle it, couldn't really find the openings to consistently land offense against Gane. Went the wrestling approach, has fought out his contract now. There's a lot of stuff still to talk about that with the matching rights championship clause that might be in there. I've seen some reports suggesting there isn't a champions clause for him, but also the injury extensions and so on. That means he's not really a free agent because the UFC's contracts are set up in such a way that it is exceedingly difficult to have power as a fighter in the negotiations phase. So I'm hoping Ngannou gets what he wants, whatever that happens to be. If that's to come back to the UFC and fight for a big payday, I'm happy with that. If that's going into boxing, I'm less interested. I've not been a big fan of the whole crossover MMA to boxing thing. It generally doesn't go very well. The fights themselves aren't usually amazing. I mean, keep in mind, former UFC champion Tyron Woodley is 0-2 against Jake Paul. It's a little bit dismissal to say Jake Paul's just a YouTuber, because what is just a YouTuber? I mean that like really in a great sense. Jake Paul does have a lot of money behind him. He's got a good coaching staff behind him, but the fact remains that he is a guy who's been pursuing professional boxing and professional combat sports for a relatively short period of time and did outbox Woodley. That is the problem. These guys have boxing games that are built for MMA, not for boxing as a whole, and there is a steep drop-off when you try to apply that elsewhere. Now, Ngannou does have some power. Maybe he can catch somebody, but it doesn't hold a lot of interest for me, but if that is how he gets paid, then I'm down with it, because Francis Ngannou deserves all the good things. He's had a hell of a life. The story of his life would make a movie very well, as someone has closed my door. So, you know, I hope that, and I don't know where it's going to go. It's very interesting. As for Gane, he'll be in the title picture real soon, probably one title win. There's not a lot of heavyweights in the UFC right now that I would honestly pick to beat Cyril Gane, because sure, we saw some disruption to his game with wrestling, but there's not that many high-level wrestlers. in the UFC at heavyweight. I mean, you're talking like Curtis Blades, Stipe Miocic, obviously, would be very interesting. But beyond that, I mean, like, who's the next rung down on the wrestling level of the UFC? Is it guys like Sergey Spivak and Marcin Tybura? It might be. And I do think he can probably beat those guys because I think he has the foot speed. And I think also it can't be underestimated that Ngannou hadn't really shown a wrestling first game before. And given the time to prepare for that kind of thing, I think we'll see a lot better from Gane. Also, Ngannou is still amazingly strong. And that's something that isn't necessarily going to be the case with other UFC heavyweights. So he'll be back. He'll be in the title picture. Hopefully Ngannou gets what he wants. It would be great if the UFC signed him for like a big contract and that became like a turn in the page of the story of fighter pay. But I think that's being very, very hopeful, if nothing else. And probably won't, not that he won't sign for a big contract, but it won't be a watershed moment of fighter pay. But I can dream. In the flyweight bout, this one was a little bit of a letdown to me, and I'm honestly not sure. I've watched the fight again. I'm honestly not sure if it's a letdown to me because it was a letdown fight, or if I had just built up what was going to happen up here too much for it to ever delivered. I've said this about some MMA fights that where the hype just gets to the point where it can't really deliver, and I'm wondering if it did that to myself. I scored the fight for Moreno. I have no problem with Figueiredo winning. The only problem I have is one judge. I'm going to check my Twitter here real quick because I identified the judge and I do want to put the name to it. Here we go. Chris Crail. Now, Crail scored round 4 for Figueiredo and round 5 for Moreno. And I object to that, not because I think scoring round 4 for Figueiredo is impossible. I did score it for Moreno. But I have no problem with, honestly, 4 going to Figueiredo. But then I feel like 5 has to go to Figueiredo in that case. Because if we look at UFC stats, which is, the advantage of post-fight. But, at the same time, I think these were... I think these showed up enough during it. Moreno outlanded Figueiredo in both rounds, but by a very, very small margin in the 5th round. Additionally, Figueiredo had the knockdown in the 5th round. Yes, Moreno had a takedown, but it was a nothing takedown. It was a takedown that, in my opinion, shouldn't have really scored for anything. It's just that while volume striking is not the be-all, end-all criteria, it's effective striking that is actually important, which is the quality and the quantity of the strikes. If we are assuming that Figueiredo hits that much harder than the 5th round, where he landed more strikes than in the 3rd round, or the 4th round, and got a knockdown, would easily mean that the 5th round of those two was the better round for Figueiredo. And it's probably something that won't get really addressed too much because I don't think anyone's really super bent up about Figueiredo winning, and I'm not. But I don't think that scorecard made a lot of sense. I've not committed Chris Crail's name to my memory, so that means that I haven't heavily disagreed with his cards in the past. So maybe this is a one-time deal, but I think that was poor. I think we obviously go to the quadrilogy fight. There's not really a big contender waiting in the wings. If we check UFC rankings, I assume it's Askar Askarov would be the next guy. Yeah, Askar Askarov, and then Pantoja and Perez and Brendan Royval. That's your top 5. And I think there's basically no market for Perez or Royval to get a title shot. And I think the market for Pantoja to get a title shot is against Moreno, not against Figueiredo, because he has lost to Figueiredo. And he has beat Moreno twice, I believe. So, yeah, if there is no one really that you're skipping the line over to get to Figueiredo, except for, I guess, Askar Askarov. I see this going to a fourth fight easily, and it's a tough call to say who's going to win it, because I think Moreno tried to make the wrong adjustments in this fight, and I think he recognized it a little bit in his post fight, because he did bring up being a little bit slow, a little bit happy to sit at range, and I don't think that's the way he beats Figueiredo. So my thoughts on the fight as a whole, or the matchup as a whole, is I still think everything that Moreno did in the second fight could work. That he has all of the opening skills. I don't think Figueiredo necessarily corrected anything. I just think that Figueiredo got a slower paced fight that really suits his skill set. And I'm a little let down by Moreno for that. So I probably would still pick Moreno in a fourth fight, but he needs to turn it up to convince people, because Figueiredo has that kind of power and ability to knock down things, and just that flash that is always going to give him close exchanges. And I think Moreno has to take that away from him. He has to leave no doubt, almost. Michel Pereira did defeat Andre Fialho. It was an entertaining fight. Pereira got to do some wacky stuff, which we're always here for. But at the same time, Fialho should have probably won if he just kept up the simple kind of pressure boxing game. Stay in Pereira's face. I don't know. I'm going to be left with this feeling after every Michel Pereira fight, I think, honestly, is that watching it is kind of exciting, but then afterwards you're like, I have no idea what this does for either fighter in any way. Saeed Nurmagomedov made quick work of Cody Stamann. I was hoping for that to be a close fight. It wasn't. For Saeed, you got to think he's fighting a top 15 fighter next. Looking at the bottom of the top 15, there's no one I'm dying to see him fight. Shane Burgos is in the top 15. That could be fun, because Burgos does have, I want to say, similar reach. Just pulling up his profile here real quick. Yeah, he's got a reasonably similar reach to Saeed that could be interesting. So is that, or is he at 135? Is he 135, 145? He's 135. Never mind, I'm looking at the wrong weight class. Genius. In that case, Song Yudong could be a fun fight. Sean O'Malley could be a fun fight. Would love to see that go down either road. As for Stamann, I don't want to sound like I'm dismissive of him, because he's a very good fighter. It's just that he is so gatekeeper to the top 15 that it's whatever fighter you want to test next against him. There's no big sexy matchup for him. It's just there. Michael Morales defeated Trevin Giles. Came back from some early problems. Got the job done. I'm not honestly sure what that means for Morales, which is kind of disappointing, because Giles is this weird, like, there's a base skill set there. There's a base physicality there. But there's terrible, terrible decision making, including, honestly, going down to 170. I know he had that story where he's like, oh, I'm the same size as Kamaru Usman, I should cut the weight. And I'm not saying he can't cut the weight. It's just that 170 is a shark tank compared to 185. And I think his random non-integrated, non-nuanced, put together skill set. Probably actually better at middleweight than it is at welterweight. So I don't know. Victor Henry had a fantastic fight against Ronnie Barcelos. I hope both of them get big fights off of this, because Henry came out there and was amazing. Amazing fight. And Barcelos is a guy who hasn't gotten nearly enough love from the UFC. So I hope they treat this loss less as a loss and let it go. I will say the one thing that did kind of keep coming up is they kept trying to hype up how short notice this fight was for Victor Henry. It wasn't that short notice, because here's the thing. The fight, they were originally supposed to fight in December. December 18th on the UFC Fight Night Lewis versus Daukhaus card. And that fight got canceled due to COVID protocols, and then got rebooked, and then got rebooked again. So it's definitely a fight that kind of feels short notice. I get it, but it wasn't actually a short notice. Now, Henry did take the fight initially on very, very short notice, so like all the credit for him. But I did feel that was a little bit overhyped up. Jack Della Maddalena made pretty short work of Pete Rodriguez. I don't really think that Rodriguez has a lot to offer. I said this when I was breaking it down. A guy who has nothing but first round stoppages and is very early in his career, and granted had a pretty long amateur career, is always going to concern me a little bit that he actually has anything deep to his skill set. Like it shows that like he hits hard, sure, but there's so much more to MMA at this level than just hitting hard. As for Della Maddalena, pardon me. A great performance, showed off good defensive striking, good offensive striking, obviously, but I still have a ton of questions about him. He was supposed to fight Warley Alves here. I hope he moves on to probably not Alves, because I don't know, that fight doesn't resonate to me, but hopefully someone who kind of prides themselves on being a pretty good boxer. It wouldn't be anyone on the UFC's rankings, but let's have a look at the Tapology rankings real quick here and see if there's somebody fitting for this. Matt Zemmelsberger. I'd be kind of down for that, although he has some of the same problems that Rodriguez has. Lyman Good is coming off a loss, so that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Maybe the winner of Carlson Harris versus Shavkat Rakhmonov. That could be good. That could be very fun. I could see that being very, very good. So let's pencil that one in there. And then Tony Gravely beat Simon Oliveira. A fight more about Oliveira's constant going for guillotines, giving up control time, being willing to put himself on his back, not being prepared. His corner was like talking about how they weren't expecting Gravely to be this level of wrestling, and I don't think you did your homework then. I don't think this fight really gives me anywhere to send either of these guys, other than one will get loser matchmaking, one will get winner matchmaking. But I think I know everything I need to know about Gravely. He's kind of in that Cody Stamon mold a little bit. Talked about him earlier. Like, he just has a hard ceiling. And for Oliveira, he needs better coaching or just better instincts. I don't know. Matt Frivola beat the crap out of Gennaro Valdez. It doesn't really change my thoughts on either fighter, other than like I wasn't really buying into Valdez's hype. And with Frivola, there's still the fact that he can be hit really hard, has a good chin, and recovers well, but does tend to get hit very hard. Good action fighter. I don't know really what you do with him. Just put him in there with another action fighter. Vanessa Dinopoulos defeated Sylvia Gomez Juarez. Apparently quit her stripper job. Good armbar, but had more to do with Gomez Juarez really giving her the armbar. Did land a really, really good punch, but that was kind of all the positiveness. And Jasmine Jassavides, I think that's how you say it, beat Kay Hansen. I'm very disappointed with Kay Hansen. I felt very confident with this pick, and it did not pan out. I don't know what you do with her. There's a good fighter in there. I just don't think the creativity is translating to the cage all that well. So, I mean, kind of, like I said, kind of a weak undercard for predicting stuff, but I will kind of lead this off. This card was pretty good. It had a lot of first round stoppages. It was exciting. And people will probably use that for the, well, there's no such thing as a bad card. Here is my take on this. And I've said this before. I'll try and coach it in new terms. The UFC is a fight promotion business. So when I critique what a card looks like on paper, I'm critiquing that promotional practice. If every card is worth watching, regardless of who's on it, regardless of the high-profile fights, regardless of the interesting natures of it, regardless of where people are going, then there is no promotion to be done. And it's kind of weird that usually people who are the bad cards have great fights crowd are also the Dana White supporters, that Dana White is a genius and an amazing fight promoter. But your argument is that he doesn't have to promote shit. You'll watch it because any fight card is a good card for the UFC. It's kind of a weird dichotomy, a weird disconnect between those two competing ideas. But I don't know. Anyways, I enjoyed the card quite a bit. Where are we going next with the UFC? Tapology Fight Center, please. I know it's a fight night. I know I looked it up the other day. Fight night, February 5th. Hey, one day before my birthday. Oh, the Strickland Hermanson card. Yeah, this is not looking great. Maybe it'll deliver, but there's not a lot of super interesting fights. I mean, at the top, you have Hermanson Strickland. Kind of interesting, but I don't know. Strickland always leaves a kind of weird taste in my mouth. And then the co-main is listed as Punahele Soriano versus Nick Maximov. I'm very not in the Maximov fandom camp. And there's a lot about Soriano I also don't like as a fighter. Marc-Andre Barrios on the card, though. Always exciting. Fighting Chidi Njokuani. Good to see him in the UFC. Jason Witt, Philip Rowe, Marquez Almeida, Castaneda versus Miles Johns. That could be fun, actually. I do like that fight. Julian Erosa, Steven Peterson. Brian Battle, Tayshaun Gordon. Hakeem Nawada, Mike Trezano. Could be fun. Malcolm Gordon, Dennis Bondar. Could be fun. The Rachmanov versus Harris fight that I talked about before. That's a fun fight. So there is some... Oh, Sam Alvey versus Phil Haas. All right, let's just quickly say it. Sam Alvey is on UFC contract still because he basically shoots other fighters in the back. Because he keeps talking about how fighter pay doesn't need to be changed. And it does. It really, really does. I'm sorry. I can't get around that. There's so much that says that it does. And I'm not really looking forward to anything. Like, I used to be a big Sam Alvey fan, but it's hard now. Anyways, see you then for the predictions for that fight card. Unless some kind of news breaks that I feel the need to hit it with, as per usual, the Discord links are below, as well as the Twitter and so on. So have fun.